Hey, Cyberspace, Nathan Wallace coming at you from my home office. I believe this is the first video as far as shooting at home. And I just wanted to kind of provide a video as far as some of my personal background. Started off as an electrical engineering intern doing some drafting work. So we did the lighting and fixture plan, as far as putting the schematics and stuff on an actual drawing, an engineering drawing. So it was cool. I remember two big projects that I played a part in. One was a state hospital. And the other was a technical community college in Natchitoches. So I remember kind of placing the little electrical outlets and giving them over to the professional engineer there, and all of a sudden getting the red mark saying, "No, that doesn't go there." So it was a cool experience. And then another internship I had during my undergrad was with the relay settings and configurations group at Entergy. And that was a really interesting experience. A lot of great people. Some of the smartest people I ever met was actually that summer. And what we did, it was a NERC initiative to make sure that the settings that were out in the relays and the RTUs matched what we had in the database as far as the back office. So we had to go in one by one, compare these different settings and make sure that everything matched up. Also did some RTU stuff as far as learning how to configure and basically program a RTU, remote terminal unit. Finished my undergrad, worked as a associate engineer for a small utility. Did transmission distribution protection and field maintenance. So, going out to the field, checking alarms, seeing what the issue was. And then, really that experience right there is probably what prompted me to go back to school and study cybersecurity. I started seeing this massive, reliance on computers, both for the computational and communications. This particular utility that when I was working there had just rolled out the metering infrastructure, the smart meters. So all that relies on communications, relies on the computational there at the meter, as well as all the different collectors. So, started seeing all that, and then I was like, okay, I need to go back to grad school. I need to go back to school and take a closer look at some of the cybersecurity stuff. So that's, like I said, that's when I pursued 2 graduate degrees, focused on power system cybersecurity. The lab that I worked for was DCSL, and we had two main threads. So it was digital forensics and control system security lab, which is now at the University of Alabama, directed by Dr. Travis Atkinson. And the two main threads, like I said, digital forensics and control system cybersecurity. So I actually have some experience doing some forensics work. Local law enforcement there in North Louisiana, they would bring us laptops, cell phones, tablets. Can you recover anything? Can you recover the evidence? So we would do, deleted files, deleted text messages, browsing history, stuff like that, and kind of extract it up and wrote a little report to kind of support the different law enforcement investigations that were going on. So that was an interesting experience. Really, really interesting. And then, like I said, the other thread was control system cybersecurity. So we would get PLCs, programmable logic controllers, relays. Can you hack into it? Can you compromise it? And then, part of the research and development aspect was, well, how do you detect that? So my focus on it, as far as what the research I was doing, was really focused on the power grid, the power systems, and that's what I did my dissertation on. And it was really neat because I worked under two advisors. I had one that was a hardcore power systems engineer, and then another one that was computer science, former intelligence community individual. And basically it was an interdisciplinary approach where I was looking at how do you detect cyber attacks against the power grid. And the approach that I took was really where I was focused on the physics of the grid. Can I just examine power flows and then kind of derive a cyber conclusion? Can you detect cyber attacks just by looking at the power system? And it turns out you can. And I think this is really important because, it really doesn't matter. It could be a bad sensor or it could be someone hacking the sensor. And the question is, can you keep the lights on? Well, the only way to do that is to look at the physics of the grid. How do you design it? How do you build it to where it's protected and secure? And this is where we get into the resiliency. So to do that, you're not looking at the communications, you're not looking at the Ethernet packets, you're not looking at the threats as far as what the nation states and different threat actors are doing. You're literally looking at making and engineering a more resilient grid. So that's what the dissertation was focused on. When I wrapped up the graduate work, actually I had a couple offers on the table. One was from the National Security Agency. I decided not to go down that route. Then I had another one from ABB as a grid systems resiliency specialist, and also decided not to go down that route. And then, I decided to work for Empirical, basically as a staff engineer doing relay RTU design, setting, and commissioning. And basically what we do, we actually build these systems for utilities all across the U.S. And, not only is it the designing, like I said, it's the building, purchasing, so some people may not be aware of this, but some utilities don't actually build and design their systems. They contract it out. So we work with utilities, like I said, all across the country, different standards. And what's nice is, as far as, not working even for a specific vendor, we're vendor agnostic. So we, I get the opportunity to play with devices, equipment, figure out how to engineer different vendors' devices into the power systems. And then, we just started seeing all the cybersecurity stuff. So we I co-founded the engineering firm Cyberical. So both of these firms are professionally licensed engineering firms. And then with Cyberical, we do risk assessments, security design and integration. So how do you build in security by design versus bolting it on? And this is, like I said, at that engineering level. And then vulnerability and patch management. So some volunteering stuff. The chair of the IEEE Computer Society, the New Orleans chapter, also involved with some Cyber Patriot stuff, the IEEE Power and Energy Society, and then some technical standards here on the right. So, we have when people talk about NERC CIP or cybersecurity for the power grid, they always think NERC CIP as far as the standards. Those are just policy standards, procedure type standards. Honestly, in a lot of cases for the back office IT and the compliance folks, well, there's also the technical engineering standards that are produced by like IEC and IEEE. So here's a few that I'm involved with. The first one, electrical power systems, cyber device function numbers, acronyms, and designations. So, once again, a lot of people may not realize this, but when you talk about cybersecurity for the grid, there's actually no way of documenting it. There's no way of putting it on a drawing. Every other aspect of the grid, the distance between buses, the type of connector, the type of relay protection, the type of automation, there's techniques, there's syntax, there's nomenclature around how do we document that on a physical drawing. Well, with regards to cybersecurity, the only thing we have right now is a little symbol, a Visio-like symbol of a firewall. In my opinion, this isn't good. We really need a way to communicate cybersecurity. How do you document it? How do you even know what controls, cybersecurity protective controls you have out there in the field? Well, it has to be documented, just like every other aspect of the grid or power systems. The other aspect, or the other standard, the second one there, guide for testing and commissioning power system cybersecurity controls. So whenever we commission a new substation, for instance, you're actually doing full end-to-end testing. You're going through, let's say if it's DMP, Modbus, and going line by line, point by point, verifying, doing a full end-to-end check. But with cyber, there's no standard on how to do that. And a trivial example of what would have protected or benefited from this type of standard is there was a utility when they first did their NERC CIP audit. Over half of their firewalls were misconfigured. So it was a paperweight doing nothing, just allowing traffic right on through. It looked good, in the little rack because it was all flashing lights, but it didn't do anything. So if that system was properly tested and commissioned, that would have been detected. As well as IoT for the connected home, the third bullet there. What would be the cybersecurity requirements for a utility trying to communicate, to, let's say, the meter, or even devices, IoT, Internet of Things devices that are behind the meter. So this is a new standard working group as far as, what we're working on in the PSCC. And then this is an existing standard here on the bottom, cybersecurity requirements for power system automation, protection, and control systems. So this is a technical standard on, what are those requirements whenever you're building an automation, protection, and control system for power systems, for the power grid. So this is one thing as far as, why power systems cybersecurity is unique. That's an example. And why, kind of what motivates me. We talk about this smart grid. Massive potential here. No pun intended. The traditional model, right? We had generation, transmission, distribution. Power was generated, voltage. You step up the voltage to transmit it across some great distance, and then you step it back down towards the distribution to serve your commercial and residential load. This model is literally being flipped on its head. We talk about solar, we talk about distributed energy resources or DERs, where the load now, which traditionally was just a consumer, is now producing, right? So we call that a prosumer, where they're putting power back onto the grid, back onto the system. So now you have this bidirectional flow of power, and that requires capabilities, that requires intelligence. So we have to add that, we have to engineer it into the system to create this energy efficient grid. And the potential, I keep saying that, no pun intended, is literally endless as far as creating a more resilient, robust system. As far as, the smart grid, a lot of people are saying, to protect the grid from natural to man-made threats, things like cyber, physical, electromagnetic, we actually need to keep the grid dumb. We don't need to install intelligence. That's baloney. Honestly, that's not the way to go. There was some reports that were released by utility. They were able to reduce what they claimed would have been a 3-day outage. So a storm rolls through. They just installed some distribution automation equipment, intelligence, and they were able to reduce what they said would have been a 3-day outage down to 3 minutes. So that's huge. We talk about the a power outage for any extended period of time. What's the worst that can happen? Loss of life. If the AC's not running, you have a baby or an older relative, that it could potentially cause a loss of life. The nursing home there in Florida after that big hurricane, loss of life. So honestly, that's what's at stake here. So really kind of continuing with this why. So things that I'm working towards. So clear up the confusion. There's a lot of confusion as far as who's really the expert, with regards to these different domains. It is funny watching people from the outside come into the, this domain, talk about the security, talk about the grid, how do we make it more resilient? There's people that who I view as experts, who are, the legitimate power system engineers. I could just stay in a room with some of these folks all day and learn something every minute. So honestly, this personal opinion, those are the guys I view as the experts. As honestly, as far as even threats to the grid, how do you keep it resilient? How do you keep it redundant, robust? The 3 R's, right? Those are the guys that are the experts, the actual, experienced engineers, operators. We talk about all these back office, like let's say IT, cybersecurity folks who are coming in. It is a leap and a stretch for me personally to kind of view those guys as the experts in a lot of this. As well as things like electromagnetic, physical, cybersecurity. So that's kind of some of the things that motivate me as far as clearing up some of the confusion that's out there. Contribute to the technological advances. Like I said, there's a lot of technology coming in, a lot of different ways, things that need to happen that aren't happening, with regards to how we're integrating, how we're adding it. Some of the technologies that are sold at the commercial and residential level, they're really sold as consumer electronics. So are those things secure? You talk about battery storage systems, for instance, microinverters on solar and installations. So are those secure? And then, overall, right, it's to create a greener, safer, more secure power system, power grid. We look at, all the capability, from even trying to attempt to reduce the carbon footprint, right? Create a greener grid. It's possible. It's just these things have to be engineered. They have to be secured if we're ever going to achieve that. So yeah, this is me. Hopefully this kind of clears up as far as who I am. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. You can reach me on Twitter, website, my own personal website there, or just comment below. So yeah, feel free to reach out. Thanks.